Good evening, everyone, and a very happy new year. Today is the first session for CCI for 2021, and I hope that 2021 is a kind and a forward looking year. I'm Dr. Kirat Sibia, consultant pulmonologist from Sibia Medical Center, Ludhiana, and I shall be moderating today's session. I would like to begin by thanking CCI National President Dr. Narendra Methuku and CCI General Secretary Dr. Ravi Dosi for having me here. A note of thanks has to be in place for the CCI founding trustees, Dr. N.H. Krishna and Dr. Narayana Pradeepa, along with Dr. Vijay Kumar Shanam Shetty, who's the webinar coordinator, because together they enable us to take the academic quest at CCI forward. I had the honor of talking to Dr. Krishna, and after talking to him, I realized why CCI is more than just an organization. It really is a family. Our session for today is on CT thorax, a radiologist's perspective, and our speaker for today's masterclass is Dr. Nikhil Gupta. He is a radiologist at HPHS at Solon. He is a postgraduate from PGI Chandigarh. He's member IRIA and member European Association for Cardiovascular Imaging. I happen to have an idea about Dr. Nikhil's perspective on various things as he is my husband, and I look forward to learning about CT thorax from him today. CT thorax is undoubtedly one of the most important weapons in a chest physician's armamentarium, which really empowers us. As per Dr. Krishna's guidance, we shall be walking from the founding basics of reading a chest CT and then flying to the diagnosis. I welcome Dr. Nikhil Gupta on the CCI platform.
Thank you for such a kind introduction, Dr. Kirat. Good evening, everyone. It, it is a great honor and pleasure to be here for this masterclass today. I would like to thank Dr. Krishna and Chest Council of India for giving me this wonderful opportunity. My topic for today is CT thorax, a radiologist perspective. I am Dr. Nikhil Gupta. Let's begin. The objectives of today's presentation are choosing from different types of CT, prescribing the right CT protocol, radiation exposure, how concerned should we be, looking at the thoracic world through the CT windows. So now let's walk the CT walk, the lymph node trail, identify the signs, and solve the CT puzzle. Beginning with the lobar anatomy, as you are well versed with, the right lung is divided into superior, middle, and inferior lobe, and the left lung is divided into superior lobe, lingula, and inferior lobe. So how do we identify the fissures? On thin slices, it is seen as a linear opacity. On thick slices, it is seen as a 1 to 2 centimeter relatively thin avascular band. So here I am showing you in this diagram the horizontal and the oblique fissure in the right lung and the oblique fissure in the left lung. Coming to the segmental anatomy of the lung. The right lung is divided into upper, middle, and lower lobe, and the left lung is divided into upper lobe, lingula, and lower lobe. In the upper lobe, on the right side, there are apical, anterior, and posterior segments, while on the left side, there are apico-posterior and interior segments. On the middle lobe, it is divided into medial and lateral segments. The lingula is divided into superior and inferior lingular segments. And then the lower lobe. On the right side, it is divided into superior, medial, lateral, and posterior basal. While on the lower side, lower lobe of the left side, the medial basal segment is not seen, which is occupied by the heart. Now coming to the division of the airway. The trachea is divided into major bronchi, which divide into the lobar bronchi, which divide into the segmental bronchi, and after 16 divisions form the terminal bronchioles, which then form the respiratory bronchiole, which then form the alveolar duct, and then they enter the alveoli. And HRCT we can follow airway up to the 8th bronchial division. Coming to the secondary pulmonary nodule anatomy. According to Miller, it is the smallest unit of lung structure marginated by the connective tissue septa. It is supplied by a lobar bronchiole and the artery which accompanies this bronchiole, and these S are the septae which are drained by the pulmonary veins and lymphatics. Here, near the at the end of the septa, you can see this vein marked by V. The size of the secondary pulmonary nodule is 11 to 17 mm on average. This is an illustration showing the same. Now coming to the ITMIG classification of the mediastinal compartment. The International Thymic Malignancy Interest Group has divided the mediastinum into prevascular, visceral, and paravertebral compartment, which is shown here in these figures. This is the prevascular, this is the visceral, and this is the paravertebral compartment, shown by the red, blue, and yellow colors. The boundaries of the superior and inferior boundaries of all these compartments are same. Superiorly, they are bound by the thoracic inlet, and inferiorly, they are bound by the diaphragm. The prevascular compartment is bounded anteriorly by the posterior border of the sternum, and posteriorly they are bounded by the anterior aspect of the pericardium, and laterally they are bounded by the lateral mediastinal pleura. Parietal mediastinal pleura. Its contents are thymus, fat lymph nodes, and left brachiocephalic veins. The visceral compartment is bounded anteriorly by the posterior boundary of the prevascular compartment, and posteriorly it is bounded by a vertical line 1 centimeter posterior to the anterior margin of the thoracic vertebral body. So this green line is that posterior boundary, and this blue is the visceral compartment. Its contents are divided into non-vascular and vascular. Non-vascular being trachea, carina, esophagus, and lymph nodes. The vascular being heart and its great vessels, intra-pericardial pulmonary arteries, and thoracic duct. Now coming to the last compartment, that is paravertebral compartment. It is anteriorly bounded by the posterior boundary of the visceral compartment, and posteriorly it is bounded by the vertical line against the posterior margin of the chest wall at the lateral margin of the thoracic spine transverse process. Okay, so this is the level. Its contents are thoracic spine and paravertebral soft tissues. Now coming to the mediastinal lymph nodes, the mediastinal lymph nodes are divided into 14 groups from 1 to 14. With the R being right, L being left, A being anterior, P being posterior. The first is the low cervical and supraclavicular lymph nodes, R being the right, L being the left. Similarly, 2 being the upper paratracheal nodes, and 4 being the lower paratracheal nodes. 5 are the para-aortic nodes, and 6 being the subaortic nodes. 7 being the subcarinal nodes, 8 being the paraesophageal, and 9 being the pulmonary ligament nodes. 10 is the hilar node, and 11 to 14 are the intraparenchymal nodes. Now I have left out 3. It is seen in axial section. It is 3A, and this is 3P. 3A being the prevascular, and 3P being the prevertebral. The upper limits of normal for the short axis node diameter. For supraaortic paratracheal, it is 7 mm. For subcarinal, it is 12 mm. However, all the others have 8 or 9 mm as normal size. So anything above this is abnormal. Coming to the CT of the mediastinum. The CT of the mediastinum, as we go from above downwards, it is divided into supraaortic, subaortic, and paracardiac mediastinum. The supraaortic mediastinum is from the thoracic inlet to top of the aortic arch. The subaortic is from the aortic arch to superior aspect of the heart, and paracardiac is from the heart to the diaphragm. The supraaortic mediastinum, as we see this axial section of CECT, we can clearly see clavicular heads. Then behind it is the thyroid gland, behind it is the trachea, and then the esophagus. The blue ones are the veins and the red ones are the arteries. So at this level, we see the jugular, internal jugular and subclavian veins, and the subclavian arteries, and left and right common carotid arteries. As we go down, these arteries joins to form the innominate artery, and here we can see right internal mammary artery. Also, the veins, namely internal jugular and subclavian veins, join to form right and left brachiocephalic veins. As we go down in this section, nothing much changes. In this section, there is a joining of the right and the left brachiocephalic vein, and they form the superior vena cava in a section below this. And from here starts the subaortic mediastinum from the arch of aorta. This is the thymus and fat. And this is the prevascular region. It has some normal lymph nodes, which are enlarged in pathologies. And this is the pretracheal space, and it also has lymph nodes. Coming down the arch, below the arch of aorta, there is ascending and descending aorta. And there is this azygous arch. And this is again the pretracheal space with lymph node. And this area is the aortopulmonary window. Now coming down, this is known as aortopulmonary window because the section below pulmonary artery starts. This is the main pulmonary artery. This is ascending aorta, descending aorta, and left pulmonary artery. And the carina, this is the level of carina, and this is the precarinal lymph nodes. Here we measure the pulmonary and aortic arteries. I will show you how. We measure aorta anterior posteriorly like this, and pulmonary artery in its maximum diameter. So this diameter should be more than this diameter. If this diameter is increased, that suggests pulmonary hypertension. Also, left pulmonary artery should have a lesser diameter than a main pulmonary artery. Coming down, we can see the right pulmonary artery, and we can see the subcarinal region. The rest of the structures are same. Then coming on the paracardiac mediastinum. Though this is not of much importance to the pulmonologist, still we will see some of the major structures here. This is the aortic root. This is the azygous vein, which came down from the azygous arch. And this is the esophagus, and this is the descending aorta. This is the left atrium, and this is the appendage. Coming down, we see the left atrium complete, and this is the right atrium, and this is the right atrial appendage. This is right ventricle outflow tract. And coronary arteries are seen at this level. From going down, we see the left ventricle outflow tract, the descending aorta, left ventricle, right atrium, and left ventricle. Coming down, we see the four chamber cardiac view. This is the right side, and this is the left side. This is the tricuspid valve. This is the mitral valve. And these are the area of coronary arteries, being this, and this. Then this is the last section. Here we see the two chambers, right and the left ventricle, and we can also see the first section in which IVC is seen. Then coming to the principles of radiation protection. The radiation protection principles are three: justification of practices, which is on the level of the physician, that is right indication. Then is the limitation of dose and optimization of protection. This is at our level, that is on radiologist level. This is guided by the ALARA principles. Before it was known as low as practical, or ALAP principle, which was given in 1977 by International Commission on Radiation Protection. Now it is known as ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable. So what is the relative radiation dose? The background radiation dose is about 2.5 to 3.2. And calculating it for 1 day, it is about 0.008 millisievert. And a chest radiograph single view has a radiation dose of 0.05, which is more than 1 day of radiation background. So the radiographs have more than 1 day of radiation, background radiation. Ultrasound and MR don't have any radiation. Nuclear medicine also have 1 day of background radiation. Fluoroscopy has 10 days. Intervention has 1 to 6 months. And CT has the maximum of more than 8 months. Coming to the general principles of chest CT. The scan is applied from lung apices to posterior costophrenic angle. Position is supine or sometimes prone for diagnosis of pleural effusion. The lung volume may be in full inspiration, in single breath hold, or sometimes expiratory scans are used to diagnose air trapping or bronchial abnormalities. The gantry rotation time is 0.5 seconds or less, and the total scan duration is less than 2.5 seconds. Next, coming to the CT, types of CT we use in the chest. So the first is non-contrast CT. Non-contrast CT can be routine non-contrast CT, low-dose CT, ultra-low-dose CT, or Cine CT. The chest contrast-enhanced CT protocols are routine contrast-enhanced chest CT. The angiography protocols are CT pulmonary angio and CT angio, which may be combined, split bolus, or triple rule out also. For masses and nodules, functional imaging is done, which is dynamic multiphase CT and perfusion CT. Coming to the indications for routine, low dose, and ultra low dose CT. Ultra low dose CT is a newer modality. It is now being used for screening of lung cancer as a part of screening. Sorry. Low dose CT is used for follow-ups of old patients who need regular CT scans, and routine CT is used for ILD, bronchiectasis, suspected pulmonary diseases, pulmonary mets, in deranged renal parameters, and febrile neutropenia. As I have already told, the dose is about 3 to 8 millisievert in a routine CT. In low dose CT, it is around 1/3 of it, and it is less than 1 millisievert in the ultra low dose CT. Coming to the indications for CECT, like non-resolving pneumonia, mediastinal whitening, pyrexia of unknown origin, malignant pleural effusion, empyema, chest wall disease, staging and follow-up of lung cancer, staging and follow-up of lymphoma, unexplained vocal cord palsy, and evaluation of solitary pulmonary nodules. Also, in this, dynamic multiphase CT is done. In blunt trauma or penetrating trauma or hemoptysis or atypical chest pain in which pulmonary embolism is to be ruled out, CECT or CT angio is done, and in this, CT angio and CT pulmonary angio is done. Coming to HRCT, first talking about the disadvantages. It is unsuitable for assessment of lung cancer and other localized lung diseases. As we have seen, we use CECT for the same. High levels of noise are seen as it is a reconstructed bone algorithm. So it is non-diagnostic for soft tissue of the mediastinum and has multiple artifacts like streak artifacts. These are due to high contrast structures such as bronchial walls, ribs, or vertebral bodies seen in the posterior lung and more evident on scans in the low MA. Motion artifacts. These are seen as a pulsation or star artifacts common in left lung base due to pulsation of the heart. Doubling artifact. Major fissures, vessels, bronchi may be seen as double, as seen in this picture. Doubling of the fissures on both sides. And these artifacts may mimic bronchiectasis. How do we interpret the HRCT? We see the patterns of involvement. It may be increased lung attenuation or decreased lung attenuation. In increased lung attenuation, the lesion is more white, and in the decreased lung attenuation, it is dark or black. So, ground glass opacity, consolidation, microlithiasis, calcification, and granulomatous disease cause increased lung attenuation. Decreased lung attenuation is caused by mosaic perfusion, honeycombing, bronchiectasis, emphysema, pneumatoceles, and lung cysts. Coming to ground glass opacity, it is a hazy increase in the lung opacity on HRCT without obscuration of underlying vessels. A GGO suggests an active or acute disease. It may be due to airspace disease or interstitial disease. We can classify GGOs on basis of zone predominance, if upper, lower, or centrilobular predominance. If upper lobe predominance is there, we have to rule out respiratory bronchiolitis or PCP pneumonia. If lower zone predominance is there, IP or DIP. Centrilobular distribution is due to hypersensitivity pneumonitis and respiratory bronchiolitis. Ground glass opacity and consolidation. How do we differentiate between the two? In ground glass opacity, the bronchi appear darker. It is called the dark bronchus sign. As you can see here, in the area of GGO, the bronchi appear darker than a normal lung. However, in consolidation, we see air bronchogram, where there is air in large bronchi, as seen here in this diagram. This is consolidation versus GGOs. Now, we classify the ground glass opacities on basis of diffuse, patchy, and nodular. Diffuse GGO is seen in PCP pneumonia, CMV, pulmonary edema, ARDS, and AIP. Patchy opacity is seen in the interstitial pneumonia, hypersensitivity pneumonia, BOOP, alveolar proteinosis, sarcoidosis. However, nodular type of GGOs are seen in hypersensitivity pneumonia, BOOP, CMV, pulmonary edema, and hemorrhage. Crazy paving. It is a scattered or diffuse ground glass attenuation with superimposed interlobular septal thickening or interlobular lines, as seen in this diagram. It is like the crazy paving tiles. The causes are infection, neoplasm, idiopathic, inhalation, and sanguinous. Infection being the pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, Neoplasm being the bronchoalveolar carcinoma, idiopathic being the alveolar proteinosis, sarcoidosis, NSIP, organizing pneumonia, inhalation being the lipoid pneumonia, serosanguinous being ARDS, in this serous fluid is there, and sanguinous being the pulmonary hemorrhage syndrome. Coming to mosaic perfusion. Mosaic perfusion refers to areas of decreased attenuation which results from regional differences in lung perfusion secondary to airway disease or pulmonary vascular disease. The pulmonary arteries will be reduced in size in the lucent lung fields, thus allowing mosaic perfusion to be distinguished from the GGOs. So, mosaic perfusion can be due to vascular disease or airway disease. If it is due to airway disease, we can see air trapping on expiratory scans. However, if it is not seen, then it is vascular disease. So, in inspiratory scans, we see areas of mosaic perfusion. If they are accentuated on expiratory scans, it is due to airway disease. Coming to nodules. Nodules can be centrilobular, random, or perilymphatic. This is the distribution of centrilobular nodules within the secondary pulmonary lobule. Sorry, this one. Within the secondary pulmonary lobules. The perilymphatic being along the septae and along the vessels. And the random being anywhere, not following this or this distribution. So coming to the centrilobular nodules. It is caused by hypersensitivity, pneumonitis, respiratory bronchiolitis, infectious airways diseases, that is entobronchial spread of TB or bronchopneumonia. It is uncommon in bronchoalveolar carcinoma, pulmonary edema, and vasculitis. Now coming to the tree in bud pattern at the thin sections of the CT. It is characterized by small centrilobular nodules of soft tissue attenuation connected to a multiple branching linear structures of similar caliber originating from a single stalk, like the tree and its branches, and all the branches are showing budding. So this is similar to a tree in bud pattern. Coming to causes. The most common cause is endobronchial spread of TB. Other infections like Staph aureus H influenza, fungal infections like Aspergillus, viral infections like CMV and RSV also can cause tree in bud. Other diseases causing tree in bud are cystic fibrosis, Cartagena syndrome, ABPA, rheumatoid arthritis, toxic fumes inhalation, pulmonary vascular disease, and some neoplasms. This is a diagram of the tree in bud appearance. Perilymphatic nodules. These are located in relation to perihilar, peribronchial, interstitium, interlobular septa, and subpleural region, and centrilobular interstitium. It is most typically seen with sarcoidosis and silicosis and Kohl-Werker pneumoconiosis. It is also seen in lymphangitic carcinomatosis. And as the nodules are touching the septum, we see the septum as beaded, and this sign is known as the beaded septum sign. Coming to the random nodules. Random nodules are seen in miliary pattern of spread in miliary tuberculosis or miliary fungal infections or hematogenous spread of METs. If they are uniform irrespective of anatomic structure, then tuberculosis versus metastasis should be thought about. Coming to linear and reticular opacities. It can be of the following types: intralobular septal thickening, interlobular septal thickening, peribronchovascular interstitial thickening, parenchymal band, subpleural line, and honeycombing. So first is the intralobular septal thickening. Intralobular septal thickening, it is caused by idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, hypersensitivity pneumonitis, asbestosis, and NSIP. It shows a fine reticular pattern and is generally associated with fibrosis. Interlobular septal thickening. It is the thickening of the interlobular septa. It is caused by the lymphangitis carcinomatosis, lymphocytic interstitial pneumonia, sarcoidosis, IPF, pulmonary edema, Kohlwerker pneumoconiosis, silicosis, and PCP pneumonia. If it is smooth, then pulmonary edema and lymphangitis should be thought about. If it is nodular, sarcoidosis or silicosis should be thought about. And if it is irregular, ILD and sarcoidosis should be thought about. Coming to the next, subpleural interstitial thickening. It is the thickening of subpleural interstitium occurs in the same diseases as interlobular septal thickening. It is in the subpleural interstitium as seen here and here. Coming to the parenchymal band. These are linear opacity, several millimeters thick and 2 to 5 millimeter in length, 2 to 5 centimeter in length, as seen in patient with fibrosis. They represent thickened interlobular septum, peribronchovascular fibrosis or atelectasis. It is common in sarcoidosis and asbestosis. Next is the honeycombing. Honeycombing is the cystic air spaces ranging from several millimeters to several centimeters, that is 2 to 3 millimeter to around 2.5 centimeter in diameter, and have a thick, clearly definable wall. On HRCT, it is seen as a cystic air-filled lucent space, and the site is peripheral and subpleural lung. The differential diagnosis is paraseptal emphysema, where the subpleural cysts occur in single layer. Honeycombing generally occurs in more than 3 layers. This is a typical CT showing honeycombing, multiple layered cysts with thick walls from few millimeters to few centimeters. This also shows the similar honeycombing. Now, differential diagnosis of honeycombing. If the honeycombing is subpleural, posterior or in posterior lobes, IPF, asbestosis, and hypersensitivity pneumonitis should be suspected. If it is in the central, upper, or anterior lobe, sarcoidosis, ARDS, radiation, injury, or hypersensitivity pneumonitis should be thought about. Coming to bronchiectasis. What are the direct and indirect signs of the bronchiectasis? Direct signs are bronchial dilatation, internal diameter more than the adjacent pulmonary artery, with contour abnormalities. This can be seen as signet ring or tram track, string of pearls, or cluster of cysts appearance. There is lack of tapering more than 2 centimeter distal to bifurcation. Visibility of the peripheral airways is seen where these peripheral airways touch the mediastinal pleura and are within 1 centimeter of the costal pleura. This is a very important direct sign. Indirect sign is bronchial wall thickening, more than 0.5 into diameter of adjacent pulmonary artery. There may be fluid or mucus-filled bronchus. There may be mosaic perfusion. Lobular nodules or tree in bud appearance may be seen, and air trapping may be seen on expiratory scans. So, types of bronchiectasis. This first one is cylindrical bronchiectasis, like tram track appearance. Cystic, this is the bunch of grapes. Cystic bronchiectasis. This is the varicose bronchiectasis, like varicose veins. And this is the differential diagnosis for bronchiectasis, that is traction bronchiectasis due to some fibrosis. The bronchi are stretched. Now, pitfalls in diagnosis of bronchiectasis. First is the pseudobronchiectasis, as seen in the LCH. Second being the cystic lung diseases. A third being the cystic lesions in PCP, pneumonia, and reversible bronchiectasis in the area of consolidation. Next, coming to the emphysema. Emphysema is the permanent abnormal enlargement of air space distal to terminal bronchiole with destruction of the walls. It is of centri-acinar, pan-acinar, or paraseptal type. Focal areas of emphysema easily distinguished from lung cyst honeycombing by absence of the walls. So this is the paraseptal emphysema. This is the centri-acinar emphysema, and this is the panlobular emphysema here. Now, the basic lung diseases which are diagnosed by the HRCT. Coming to the cystic lung diseases. First is the Langerhans cell histiocytosis. It is seen in the young smokers, and it involves bilateral mid and upper zones with sparing of costophrenic angles. There are nodules 1 to 5 millimeter, multiple thin or thick walled cysts which may be of various shapes and sizes, GGOs, and mosaic perfusion. This is a case showing multiple bizarre shaped cysts in both upper lobes. However, there is relative sparing of the costophrenic angles. Coming to LAM or lymphangiomyomatosis, it is seen in young females and more than 50% have pneumothorax. HRCT shows thin walled cysts which are generally round in shape and have diffuse distribution. Here the costophrenic angles are involved with mild septal thickening and GGOs also seen. So in this case we see multiple round cysts of various sizes with thin walls, and these are very small cysts. These are some very large cysts. Some nodules and some GGOs may also be seen. Coming to the various cystic diseases, we have covered LAM, Langerhans LCH, and cystic bronchiectasis and honeycombing. In LIP, there are cysts which are less numerous than LCH and histiocytosis, and pneumatoceles show scattered patchy distribution with findings of pneumonia. Coming to interstitial pneumonias. Interstitial pneumonias may be IPF or IIPs other than IPF. In this, there are desquamative, RBILD, AIP, NSIP, cryptogenic organizing pneumonia, and LIP. Coming on the IIP. So, HRCT criteria for UIP are definite, probable, or inconsistent with UIP. Definite are subpleural, basal predominance, reticular abnormality, honeycombing with or without traction bronchiectasis, and absence of any features in this table. Probable UIPs have similar features except there is no honeycombing in probable UIP. In inconsistent pattern, there will be upper or mid-lobe predominance, or peribronchovascular predominance, or GGOs, or micronodules, or cysts, or mosaic attenuation, or consolidation. If any of these is seen, we have to think any other diagnosis other than IPF. So this is the distribution of the honeycombing in the IPF, known as apico-basal gradient. This is a case showing honeycombing with in the subpleural location. This is a typical case of IPF. There are few GGOs also seen here. The NSIP is non-specific interstitial pneumonia. It may be due to connective tissue disease, drug-induced ILD, or chronic hypersensitivity pneumonitis as underlying features. So the HRCT findings are GGOs, most distinct, and airspace consolidation, reticular opacities, and peripheral and lower lung predominance. These are the patchy GGOs and some areas of consolidation. This is the peripheral distribution of the NSIP. Coming to RBILD, it is seen in smokers. The features are centrilobular nodules, patchy GGOs, bronchial valve thickening, centrilobular emphysema and air trapping, and upper lobe predominance, very important. And these arrows show multiple ground glass nodules in centrilobular distribution. Differential diagnoses are acute hypersensitivity pneumonitis, desquamative interstitial pneumonia, and NSIP. Now coming to DIP. DIP is also seen in smokers. The findings are mainly GGOs with occasional interlobular septal thickening with peripheral, patchy or diffuse and lower distribution. It is seen in the lower lung zones. This was seen in the upper lung zones, RBILD upper and DIP in the lower lung zones with centrilobular emphysema. So differential diagnoses are RBILD and acute hypersensitivity pneumonia. You can see multiple ground glass opacities forming mosaic attenuation. Coming to LIP. These are associated with collagen vascular disease, immunodeficiency, and most importantly, Sjogren syndrome. So HRCT findings are multiple cysts alone or in conjunction with GGOs, as seen in this case. There are multiple GGOs with very, very small cysts. So these have lesser number of cysts than LCH or LAM. And the distribution is centrilobular subpleural lung nodules with thickening of interlobular septa and peribronchovascular interstitium. The DDs being sarcoidosis, lymphangitis carcinomatosis, hypersensitivity pneumonitis, and PCP pneumonia. Coming to acute interstitial pneumonia. This is a very severe finding, generally seen. Generally, it mimics ARDS. With very severe involvement of the lung in the hilar region, causing a batwing appearance. Bilateral patchy diffuse areas of ground glass opacities with airspace consolidation, architectural distortion as seen here, and combination of all these findings. And consolidation is bibacillar and dependent. Coming to the pulmonary abnormalities in collagen vascular diseases. In rheumatoid arthritis, UIP pattern is the most prominent. In systemic sclerosis, NSIP pattern is more prominent. In SLE, there is hemorrhage. In polymyositis, dermatomyositis, organizing pneumonia, that is reverse halo sign. And mixed connective tissue disorder, there is no particular order in which abnormality is seen. And in Sjogren syndrome, it is LIP is most common. Coming to the hypersensitivity pneumonitis. Hypersensitivity pneumonitis is divided into acute, subacute, and chronic. The hypersensitivity pneumonitis, acute hypersensitivity pneumonitis shows ill-defined airspace consolidation and mid and lower zone predominance, and nodules may be seen. HRCT shows consolidation and centrilobular nodules. So these are the centrilobular nodules and some airspace consolidations. Subacute hypersensitivity pneumonitis. The very important sign is the head cheese sign, which is ground glass with mosaic perfusion. This is a block of head cheese, and this is the CT finding. You can see the similarity between the two. So this is ground glass with mosaic perfusion. Head cheese sign, very diagnostic of subacute hypersensitivity pneumonitis. Coming to the chronic hypersensitivity pneumonitis, there may be reticulation, architectural distortion, traction bronchiectasis, and broncholectasis, and honeycombing may also be seen. You can see this architectural distortion, traction bronchiectasis can be seen here, and reticulation can be seen here. Also, honeycombing can be seen here. So this is a typical chronic hypersensitivity pneumonitis. Coming to Churg-Strauss syndrome, it may be due to it may show consolidations or GGOs in 60% of cases. As seen here, a patch of consolidation, another patch lower down with GGOs. Nodules or masses and cavitation are rare in 20% cases, and bronchial wall thickening or bronchiectasis are also seen. Pulmonary edema can also be seen. Coming to chronic eosinophilic pneumonia, it presents with fever, cough, dyspnea, weight loss, and malaise. The HRCT findings are peripheral airspace consolidation, like organizing pneumonia, peripheral GGOs, rarely crazy paving, linear band-like opacities, reverse bat wing appearance, like organizing pneumonia, and upper lobe predominance, which is unlike organizing pneumonia. So, this is a typical picture of chronic eosinophilic pneumonia with airspace consolidations and GGOs. And sometimes crazy paving may also be seen. This is reverse bat wing type. Hilum is spared while peripheral lung is involved. Coming to the pneumocystis carinii pneumonia. It is the most important opportunistic infection in HIV. HRCT findings are patchy or diffuse bilateral ground glass opacities, central or perihilar or upper lobe predominance, thick-walled cavities, thin-walled cyst, pneumothorax, consolidation, and reticulation. Coming to active tuberculosis. Active tuberculosis have patchy upper lobe or patchy unilateral or bilateral airspace consolidation. Cavitation, thick or thin-walled, as seen here, a thick-walled cavity. Centrilobular nodules with tree in bud. This is centrilobular nodules with tree in bud. This is the miliary distribution, and sometimes pleural effusion in empyema and low-density hilar lymph nodes are seen. Coming to aspergillosis related lung disease. It is divided into acute ABPA, chronic necrotizing aspergillosis, angioinvasive aspergillosis, and airway invasive aspergillosis. Allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis shows severe central bronchiectasis with mucus plugging. As seen here, there is mucus and high density mucus, as seen in this and this. Centrilobular nodules with tree in bud, some centrilobular nodules, and diffuse GGOs may also be seen. Mosaic perfusion and air trapping could also be seen in ABPA. Now coming to the other aspergillosis. Chronic, angioinvasive, and airway invasive. In chronic, there is upper lobe consolidation, one or more nodules, cavitation, or intracavitary mycetoma. Angioinvasive being shows halo sign and air crescent sign, while airway invasive show patchy peribronchial consolidation, GGO, and centrilobular nodules. This is a picture of angioinvasive aspergillosis showing halo sign. This is GGO surrounding a consolidation. And here there is air crescent sign seen. Now, differential diagnosis of halo sign. This can be also seen in Wegener's, Kaposi sarcoma, bronchoalveolar carcinoma, and adenocarcinoma. Coming to alveolar proteinosis. It may be idiopathic or due to exposures to silica, immunodeficiency, hematologic lymphatic malignancy, or due to chemotherapy. HRCT findings being bilateral ground glass opacity, smooth septal thickening, consolidation, and patchy geographic areas, as seen here. It is a patchy geographic area showing mosaic, crazy paving type pattern. Coming to lymphangitic carcinomatosis, in 50% of the patients, it may be focal or unilateral, as seen here. Smooth nodular peribronchovascular interstitial thickening is seen with thickening of fissures, and lung architecture is generally preserved, and pleural effusion may be seen. In this case, we see bilateral lymphangitic carcinomatosis showing crazy paving type appearance. Coming to sarcoidosis. Sarcoidosis, the HRCT findings, most important being the perilymphatic nodules, and second most important being the lymph nodes. In this, we can see a hilar lymph node, a subcarinal lymph node, and perilymphatic nodules in bilateral lungs. It is mostly seen in upper lobes. Coming to pneumoconiosis. This may be fibrotic or non-fibrotic type. Fibrotic is divided into silicosis, asbestosis, Kohlwerker pneumoconiosis, and variolosis. Non-fibrotic is divided into siderosis, stenosis, and barytosis. Coming to asbestosis, it shows fine reticulation on HRCT, thickened interlobular septa, traction bronchiectasis, architectural distortion, subpleural line, and honeycombing, which is seen in advanced aspergillosis. In this CT, we can see subpleural nodules in these arrows and patchy GGOs. These are the patchy GGOs in subpleural location, and interlobular septal thickening, which is seen here, here, and these are pleural plaques. Here there is subpleural consolidation with honeycombing here, and some GGOs like here, and reticulation. And there is pleural thickening seen here and here. Coming to silicosis and Kohlwerker pneumoconiosis, the HRCT findings are centrilobular subpleural nodules, which are 2 to 5 mm in size, and these are bilaterally symmetrical and evenly distributed. There may be lymph node enlargement or calcification seen. So this is a typical picture of Kohlwerker pneumoconiosis or silicosis, showing multiple nodules which are symmetrically distributed in both the lobes, some of them joined to form a large consolidation. So nodules of silicosis are better defined than those of Kohlwerker pneumoconiosis. In both silicosis and Kohlwerker pneumoconiosis, the masses can undergo necrosis and cavitation. Primary massive fibrosis in silicosis is associated with mass-like consolidation with apical parenchymal scarring and cicatricial emphysema. PMF in Kohlwerker pneumoconiosis is conglomerate masses that are usually oval or with irregular borders. Now coming to the lung CA, I have included classification just to show the fact that the small cell, which was a category of its own, is now being under neuroendocrine, along with large cell neuroendocrine and carcinoid tumors. However, large cell adenosquamous squamous cell and adenocarcinoma are separate categories. Next, coming on to the differentiating features of various carcinomas. So, in adenocarcinoma, which is least commonly associated with smoking, there is a peripheral lung nodule which can be solid or non-solid. or ground glass appearance. Squamous cells carcinoma, it is associated with smoking, and there are involvement of multiple bronchi. Also, cavitation is seen in some. Large cell carcinoma is associated with smoking, and there is a large mass more than 4 centimeters seen. These metastasize early. Small cell are very strongly associated with smoking and presents as large perihilar mass with involvement of the main lobar bronchi and lymph node involvement is there. So this is a case of heterogeneously enhancing large mass in the left hilar and perihilar region with few GGOs in the left lower lobe. This came out to be a adenocarcinoma of the lung. Next is this is an example of squamous cell carcinoma. Here the upper lobe bronchus shows a mass shown by the blue arrow. The yellow arrow shows the collapse of the upper lobe, and this is the convexity of the major fissure, which is seen as the golden S sign. This is a large cell carcinoma with a very large mass, more than 4 centimeters, with few areas of necrosis, if you see closely, and left pleural effusion. Mucus plugging. Focal mucus plugging is more specific for cancer. Finger in glove appearance is seen, and distal lung is, however, aerated. Now coming to the last part of the seminar, that is CT in COVID-19. What is the role of CT scan in COVID-19? It is not recommended in screening or suspected case, except in suspected case if it is RT-PCR negative and have a strong clinical deterioration. In proven case, it is used in hospitalized patients with specific indications, and also it is used in follow-up of recovered patients. Typical features are divided into obligatory and confirmatory features. The obligatory features being ground glass opacity with or without consolidation in lung regions close to visceral pleural surfaces, including fissures. Subpleural sparing is allowed, and it may be multifocal. The confirmatory features being ground glass regions with unsharp or sharp demarcation, crazy paving, patterns compatible with organizing pneumonia, OP, or thickened vessels within the parenchymal abnormalities found in all confirmatory patterns. Now coming to the CORADS. The CORADS is given on CT scan for corresponding level of suspicion of pulmonary involvement in COVID-19. It has 6 categories. The category 0, it has actually 7 categories. 0 is non-interpretable and 6 is proven, that is RT-PCR positive. CORAD 0, scans are incomplete or insufficient quality. Example, severe artifacts due to coughing or breathing. CORADS 1, normal CT scan comes under CORADS 1, and the or CT findings of unequivocal or non-infectious origin. For example, mild or severe emphysema, periphyseal nodules, lung tumors, and fibrosis. This is a normal CT scan, comes under CORADS 1. In CORADS 2, the CT findings are typical of infectious origin and are considered not compatible with COVID-19. For example, bronchitis, infectious bronchiolitis, bronchopneumonia, lobar pneumonia, and pulmonary abscess. So these are lobar consolidation and tree in bud appearance consistent with a bacterial infection. Coming to CORADS 3, equivocal findings for pulmonary involvement of COVID-19 based on CT features that also can be found in other viral pneumonias or non-infectious causes. For example, perihilar ground glass opacity is homogeneous, ground glass opacities, smooth interlobular septal thickening with or without effusion. in absence of other typical CT findings. So this is RT-PCR negative patient with clinical diagnosis of community-acquired pneumonia. You can see ground glasses in these both subpleural locations. Coming to CORADS 4, a high level of suspicion for pulmonary involvement by COVID-19. Also show overlap with other viral pneumonias. Findings are similar to category 5, however, not in contact with visceral pleura or superimposed on diffuse pre-existing pulmonary abnormalities. For example, here unilateral ground glass appearances and ground glass appearance with emphysematous changes. These come under CORADS 4. CORADS 5 has a very high level of suspicion for pulmonary involvement based on typical CD finding, which I have explained in earlier slide. And CORADS 6 is a proven COVID-19 positive RT-PCR. Now, we will see some cases of COVID-19. This was a 62-year-old woman had a high index of suspicion and negative for initial RT-PCR, showing crazy paving pattern and consolidation in bilateral lower lobes. This is a 53-year-old patient with multiple bilateral peripheral well-defined rounded ground glass opacities. Came out to be COVID positive. This is the same CT in corneal view showing subpleural location of the GGOs. Next is the CT of a 48-year-old male patient with bilateral lower lobe consolidation and interlobular thickening and ground glass appearance. This is a 60-year-old male with bilateral consolidation and interlobular septal thickening, as seen here, though there are some artifacts also. This is the last CT showing acute thromboembolism, shown by the yellow arrow in a 36-year-old woman. The thromboembolism is seen as a gray dot in the white vessel. With this, I end the seminar. I would like to conclude by saying that chest CT is an imaging modality offers to combine anatomical and clinical information through multidisciplinary approach to determine diagnostic probability ranging on the horizon between pathognomonic and intermediate CT presentation. With a proper clinical background and chest CT, an increase in diagnostic confidence serves as a boon to the patient, as it increases the accuracy in therapeutic decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nikhil, for such a comprehensive session on thoracic imaging. Thank you for so patiently walking us from the shallow waters to the deep seas of CT thorax. Now we have quite a few queries, and let us begin with addressing them. And the first question that I would like to address from the audience is that, how do you feel that the pulmonologists could be more specific in prescribing CT? And I think they want to ask is, how do you choose between prescribing plain CT, CECT, or combined plain plus CECT?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kirat. Thank you for the question. As you know, we radiologists need a clear clinical indication. So it is not a problem for us to decide between which protocol to do, but still for the knowledge of everyone. NCCT is generally done in parenchymal lung diseases, especially in the diffuse type of lung diseases. And CECT is done in the tumor-like lesions, mediastinal masses, hilar masses, or any kind of chest wall masses, or lymphomas or lymph node assessment. And CT angio is generally done in embolism. CT angio plus CECT is to be done because in addition to thrombus, we need to differentiate infarct.
All right. Okay, so that answers it. So I would like to ask the next question, go on to the next question from Dr. Suresh. He asked that when suspecting pulmonary embolism, can we combine, it's a good question, can we combine CT pulmonary angio with lower limb venogram using single dose of contrast, and would you recommend it?
Yeah, definitely. It should be done. It is of great importance to the patient so that we don't have to take the patient for a second sitting of CT. Right? We extend our CT to the lower limb, and at 120 to 150 seconds, we acquire the CT venogram of the leg.
Using the same contrast in the same sitting, and so it decreases.
No additional contrast is required.
So decreases the load on kidneys as well. So that makes sense.
Yeah, decreases. Yes.
So, okay, so here's another question. Do you have any specific recommendations with respect to quantity and choice of contrast?
Generally, we use iohexol, and we use 50 ml, 50 cc contrast for chest. And if we are doing angiography, we use full dose of contrast. That is about 2 ml per kg body weight. And if patient is like healthy adult patient, we use 100 ml of contrast. That should be enough. And if we suspect any renal abnormality, and CT is important to be done. It is very important to do the CT at that time. So we use Visipeg, which is safer.
Please go ahead.
We have to look for the risk-benefit ratio before giving the contrast, actually.
So here's a question that I'd like to ask you is that, if there are deranged LFTs, would you still go in for, is it safe to use these contrasts? Would you?
It is not totally safe to use the contrast, but if it is urgent and we require to give the contrast, so we can always do a dialysis later on. These contrasts are dialysable.
Okay. I think we were also using N-acetylcysteine, but it's no longer recommended.
It is no longer recommended.
Yeah, it's no longer recommended.
Only saline, we can give hydration before and after the contrast. That is only recommended. Sodium bicarbonate is also not recommended these days.
Okay, thank you. So here's another question. Would you recommend using MRI chest? Where would you recommend using an MRI chest instead of CT chest?
MRI chest is generally used in pediatrics. That is very important because we want to minimize the dose of radiation. And we also use in MRI in evaluation of mediastinal masses and wherever CT can't be done. So, and also in pulmonary angiography without contrast. That is also important. We can always, there are many indications and many studies are going on.
Okay. So we have quite a few questions on COVID, so we'll take them one by one. So here's this question from, is from Bhilwara, SL Ranka. He asked that, how do you calculate the lung involvement? So
there are two types of scoring, which is generally being used, though there are more than 5 types of scoring actually. So this is, this first scoring is, we see the involvement of 18 segments of the lungs. Total 18 segments are there in both lungs. We divide them into 20 regions and we score them from 0 to 40. So this is out of 40 scores. So mild is less than 20 and severe is more than 20. However, there is a second type of scoring in which we divide lungs into 5 lobes. three on the right side, two on the left side. And if there is less than 5% involvement, we give score 0. 5 to 25% of involvement, we give score 1. 25 to 6 to 49%, we give score 3. From 50 to 75, we give score 4, and more than 75, we give score 5 for each lobe. And then we add total score, which will become out of 25. So this is a better system because it has many studies are going on, and this has shown 100% specificity. However, sensitivity is around 82%.
So how do you compare this to the other scoring where, some radiologists, they give reporting out of 40, the denominator for the total CT scoring is 40. So how do you compare this with that? So you mean to say the 25 one is better?
25 one is definitely better because it is shown by many studies from India, China, and others.
Okay. So here's another question. Again, he's asked two questions. He's asking that, Mr. Anka, by looking at the percentage of involvement, can you declare the prognosis? I think, Dr. Anka, it's, different patients who come in with COVID. First of all, they respond differently to the disease and they respond differently to the treatment. So far, the cases that we have been seeing, you cannot predict on the basis of CT scoring how the patient will respond to treatment. Yes, you can say the patient has severe disease if the score is high, but you cannot say how the prognosis will be like because you cannot predict how the patient will respond to treatment. So this is a question by Dr. Ashok Udape from Kolhapur. He is asking, can only CT thorax diagnose COVID-19?
No. As I have told already in my presentation, that it's not confirmatory. RT-PCR is confirmatory. It is only suggestive. So we reserve HRCT in specifically hospitalized patients or RT-PCR negative patients in whom there is a high suspicion of COVID-19 or very strong history of contact. So it is not done routinely. It should not be done.
I guess that's why we have CORADs after all, right?
Yeah.
Because so it can only give a probability, but you can't tell. It can't be, can't be sure.
Yeah, CORADs 4, many cases fall in CORADs 4, and so we can't be sure whether they are CORADs 4 or CORADs 5.
So the same question is also asked by Dr. Madamse Ramase Sami from Kalpakkam. So I think we've answered it to his satisfaction. Okay, so here's another question from Mumbai by Dr. Tridib Chatterjee. So he's asking that it is difficult to differentiate between chronic HP and chronic sarcoidosis because you may not get classical fissural nodularity. Please comment.
In chronic sarcoidosis and chronic HP, we get fibrosis, both of them. So first of all, it is not a definite way to differentiate between them. And sarcoidosis is generally a histopathological diagnosis. Plus sarcoidosis, we have lymph nodes, prominent lymph nodes in the hilum. That differentiates between the two.
Right. So I think as a clinician, we would add that when we are diagnosing a patient with sarcoidosis, the serum ACE levels and the the negative MON2. So all these things come into play. I mean, talking from a clinician point of view. And chronic HP, we always ask for a history of exposure to something that could be a possible allergen. And then we also have the hypersensitivity panel, which is available now for specific allergen antigens. And they help further making the diagnosis. And I think it's valid that nodularity may or may not be there, and when the disease is very severe, either ways you cannot, the fibrosis will be prominent. But yes, the lymph nodes will give us a pointer. Okay, so here's another question. Good questions coming for COVID. So how would you interpret the CT scoring in a patient with lobectomy or pneumonectomy?
As I have told earlier, that each lobe is given a separate score out of 5, right? So logically, we should exclude that lobe, that we should decrease the total scoring, and we can give the probability like that. That should be done.
So let's say a patient has a left pneumonectomy. The left lobe is not, the left lung is not there, right? So what would be, how would you score that?
So the right lung has 3 lobes, 5 into 5, 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15. So we will give that score out of 15. But we will also mention in bracket that this is the 25 type of scoring.
Yeah, not the 40 kind of scoring. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And also maybe it would be a good idea to score to score the right lung and left lung separately and report it like that. Maybe the scoring.
I don't know. I really don't know that one.
So that's just an idea. Maybe we could do that. So again, coming back to COVID, it's really something that's the topic of the season. When to suspect a secondary super added infection on a background of COVID?
Now, as I have told in CORADs already, if there is a secondary bacterial infection, there should be consolidation, mainly lobar consolidation should be there. And there may be trine bud nodules, which will differentiate bacterial from viral infection. So that may be seen in the secondary infection on the background of COVID.
Right, so the alveologram and the nodules mainly. That would be a pointer. Okay, so let's have the next question, please. Okay, so you've also got some compliments from, I'd like to speak it out, from Jyoti Reshma Kozhikode. She says, nice presentation, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, here's a question from Dr. Mohan from Hyderabad. He's asking about comparing mosaic attenuation versus pulmonary edema in HRCT chest. Would you elaborate that for him?
Pulmonary edema, the main finding is the increased lung attenuation, right? And mosaic attenuation is a type of decreased lung attenuation. Number one is that. Secondly, pulmonary edema has typical bat wing appearance, right? Hilar lung is involved and peripheral lung is paired. However, in mosaic attenuation, there is air trapping, which we differentiate on expiratory scan that I have explained earlier.
So that's the difference in the attenuation. You know, here one side we have the infiltrates which are coming. We are having interstitial pulmonary edema. You know, the edema is there. That's causing coming as increased attenuation. On the other side, we have air trapping, which we see as decreased attenuation. So right, the mosaic. Okay, so let me ask you another question. This one I would like to ask from my side. What is the scope of artificial intelligence, you know, in the current scenario?
Artificial intelligence is, though it is underdeveloped for now, and we should have a lot of data before using artificial intelligence and right clinical diagnosis to assist that data, so that if we input a wrong data in AI, we will always get a wrong result, right? So it is being used. It is also being used somewhere in COVID management, and the biopsy correlation is very important in that one, and RT-PCR correlation.
So we are not there yet. In other words, we're just not there.
The studies are going on definitely, but we are not definitely using it right now.
We are not there yet. Okay.
Okay, how to differentiate between, this is a latest question by, it's just coming from Samina from Hyderabad. How to differentiate between diffuse alveolar hemorrhage and PAP, and how to differentiate it from, how to differentiate okay, so there are two questions she's asking. COP from eosinophilic and pneumonia, eosinophilic pneumonia. So let me answer that. So COP and eosinophilic pneumonia, chronic eosinophilic pneumonia, will actually have reverse pulmonary edema pattern. It will have patchy consolidation, but what differentiates it from COP or cryptogenic organizing pneumonia is that chronic eosinophilic pneumonia has upper lobe predisposition. Predominantly upper lobe is involved, right?
Yes.
Maybe
Yes.
you can.
Yes. Which is a differentiating feature from OP.
From OP, right. And how to differentiate DAH from PAP? So diffuse alveolar hemorrhage is essentially going to be patchy, infiltrates will be there, diffuse alveolograms will be there, but PAP, pulmonary alveolar proteinosis, typically crazy paving pattern will be there. So the interceptal, the crazy paving would be a trademark or would be a characteristic in PAP, which will not be there in diffuse alveolar hemorrhage, right?
Yes.
Also, when we're talking about DAH, we also look at the other clinical signs. Is the patient losing on blood? Are we having signs of, so clinical signs are also very important.
Plus CTPA can be done. CTPA can be done in that. CTBA and CTPA can be done to identify the source of hemorrhage.
Yes. So that would be there to tell if it is a diffuse pulmonary hemorrhage or if it is a isolated hemorrhage. That is what CTPA will help us with. So here's a question by Dr. Aritra Ganguly, Kolkata. Can we get fissural nodules in lymphangitis carcinomatosis, sir? Can we get fissural nodules in lymphangitis carcinomatosis, sir?
In this, we get centrilobular type of nodules.
Okay. All right. So let's see.
If there is lymphangitic spread of carcinoma, we can get a fissural nodule.
We will get fissural nodules. Okay, so that clears it better. Okay, so these are two questions from Dr. N. Murugan, Chennai. How often do you see pleural effusion in COVID, sir? So may I answer that? Because I think in COVID, we are seeing pleural effusion not very often, but we are seeing it later in the disease in patients who also get myocarditis, who also have cardiac involvement, who also, because we have even had patients who have come up with LVF with secondary to COVID. So in those cases, yes, we are having pleural effusion, but primarily not so much. Would you like to comment on that? How often are you seeing pleural effusion in COVID?
Not very often, not in early disease at least.
Not in early disease. I'm generally seeing in patients who are decompensated, more or less, you know. He has another question. In your opinion, how often COVID patients go for progressive pulmonary fibrosis? So that's again a clinical question, but would basically how often do people who have COVID go for progressive? I think that's the thing with this disease. You cannot predict who's going to have progressive fibrosis and who's not going to have progressive fibrosis. We have had quite a few patients who have been on oxygen as long as 2 to 3 months post the disease. And then there are patients who generally come off oxygen within, say, within 2 weeks on average. Mostly to about 2 weeks, people get off oxygen, because also the factor is, first of all, the disease severity, how severe the patient was, you know, what kind of disease the patient had come into the hospital. Was it a very severe disease? So the patients who have the more severe disease, they tend to have longer periods of recovery. They are on oxygen for longer times post COVID once they go home. And yes, and we can't predict who is going to end up having fibrosis, who's not going to have fibrosis. More or less, people who come early and who get early treatment, the standard that we are using, remdesivir, steroids, they are less likely to have fibrosis. Patients who come later, say by day 10, 11, and when they've actually decompensated and they come to us, that's by the time the CT ferrity scoring is also bad and is on the worst side, and such patients are more likely to have fibrosis. Okay, so let me see. Indications for repeat CT thorax in COVID. This is a question from Dr. Deepak Kumar Manna from Baliarpur. So basically, repeat. You can answer that, please. Go ahead.
When the patient is deteriorating, oxygen saturation is not reaching to what it should, right? And the patient is not responding to therapy, then we should assess again. That is one very important. Others, you can go ahead.
Yeah, that's about it. Patient is deteriorating, or we want to see if fibrosis has set in, or we want to see if there is any secondary infection. Mainly, we want to see if there's any reason for deterioration and if there's any indication for prolonging or adding any antibiotic therapy. So that would mainly be that. Yeah, that would be the common indication for repeating CT. So Dr. Jyothi Reshma Kozhikode is asking, what is proximal bronchiectasis? I think she's referring to the central bronchiectasis that
Right.
we generally see that in APPA, and so the peripheral bronchioles are not as involved.
Okay.
Okay, so next question. Okay, let me also throw in some comments. So Dr. Ajithar from Jaipur says it was a wonderful session.
Thank you.
And all right. Dr. Gopi Krishna from Vijayawada is asking how to differentiate mosaic pattern of CT scan between airway disease and vascular disease.
So as I have already covered it earlier, but still,
please go ahead.
We do an expiratory scan if the mosaic perfusion persists or mosaic attenuation persists. So it is due to airway disease. However, if it goes away on an expiratory scan, it is likely due to a vascular disease, or it is known as mosaic perfusion.
All right. And so this question again has come up. Can CECT be done in deranged LFTs? So I think the reason this question is coming in, maybe the protocol at our setup is we generally only order RFTs when we are considering a patient, for CECT. But, if a patient, even when a patient has normal RFTs, but LFTs are deranged, if they're quite high, let's say the bilirubin is very high. I've noticed that the gastroenterologists generally avoid CECT. The reason is that they don't want to precipitate an already sick patient towards decompensating him, and they don't want to precipitate a hepatorenal syndrome. So even with the
contrast-induced nephropathy can be seen in sick patients, yes, definitely.
So even though the RFTs may be all right to begin with, but in a patient with the severely deranged bilirubin, direct indirect bilirubin being very high, so such patients are very prone to be pushed towards hepatorenal syndrome. Right.
Also, Visipeg can be given, as I told earlier. Visipeg
can be done. So is that a question? Is that something that you'd like a pulmonologist to request? Would you want the pulmonologist to request, or would you just want us to attach the LFT, RFT and send them to you, to the radiologist, and let the radiologist decide what contrast they want to use?
It is better for us to decide, actually. We have more experience with the contrast.
Right. And also keep things simple for us. Right.
Yes.
Okay, let's see.
Just give the right indication. That's about it.
Okay, so City IV City they've written just IV, I'm not sure. So this is Dr. Ganesh Dhangar. He's asking, please mention HU range, like for blood or thick abscess. So I think that's a privilege that radiologists have, right? You can always. So is it possible to differentiate if it is a blood-filled cavity or if it is an abscess based
We
on
can,
on
we
the
can do
HU?
that. No, not really actually. This is confusing, but we can do that on GRE sequence in MR.
You can do that on MR. So can
Yeah.
you actually? So let me just take this a bit forward. Can you differentiate between, because the pus can be thick as well, and the blood could be coagulated as well. So does that, won't that be a hindrance, or can you still differentiate on CT or MR? Can you
We
tell if
can
it is a,
differentiate on GRE sequence on MR.
so you can tell if the pleural cavity has thickened blood or thickened, pus,
Yeah,
if it's being,
yeah,
so
we can.
it can give a pointer. It can
Yeah.
help. Okay. All right. How to differentiate? This is a question from Ahmedabad by Arjun Sin Gohil. How to differentiate between, pulmonary edema in heart failure, renal failure, and superadded pneumonia? I think that would be more of a clinical differentiation, Dr. Um, Sin, because if the RFTs are deranged, and also there's a role for, here comes the critical care aspect of it all. You will be actually looking for signs of fluid overload elsewhere in the body as well, signs of renal decompensation and signs of cardiovascular decompensation. You'll be going in for an echo, and you will be going to look at the fluid status of the body, measuring the IVC and seeing if it is dilated, or how the collapsibility is there. So that would be more on the clinical side. And let's see, there are more questions still pouring in. All right, so this is a question from Dr. Gopi Krishna from Vijayawada. Do different connective tissue diseases have a particular pattern of ILD, or it's overlapping most often?
Though there are different connective tissue disorders do have a prominent pattern, but they can overlap. They can overlap. They can
overlap.
Definitely overlap. I have included a table of ILDs. You can find it in web. Yeah, you can see how much involvement it is.
All right. Here's a question from Dr. Vijay P. Jain, East Delhi. How common is the ultra low CECT in our country? Could you also maybe tell a bit about ultra low CECT again?
No, it's not ultra low CECT. It is ultra low NCCT. It is a type of non-contrast CT, ultra low dose CT.
Okay.
So this is used for generally screening of lung cancer. The studies have just started. Some studies in our institute have also been started in PGIMR Chandigarh.
All right. So you are doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. So Dr. Hariharan from Hyderabad is asking, in upper cuts of CT, if mediastinal lymph nodes present posterior to trachea, how to name it? So that will be according to the staging, right? Okay.
Posterior to trachea must be Pre-vertebral, so it is 3P.
Dr. Shamim Ullah Khan from New Delhi is asking, he's saying nice presentation, and he's asking about
Thank you.
HAM, the high attenuation mass. How common is it in ABPA, and is it diagnosed on HRCT?
It can be diagnosed on HRCT. I have pointed that out earlier.
Yeah, it can be. Okay, so here's another one on COVID one, and interesting again. This is from Hyderabad, Dr. Geeta. She asks how to differentiate between aspiration pneumonia and COVID involving only basis. I think there has to be a history. When you're talking aspiration pneumonia, there has to be a history of altered sensorium. There has to be the particular, lobes have to be involved, and there has to be a reason to suspect that why you're suspecting aspiration pneumonia in a patient. Did
Plus
the patient
RT-PCR.
have plus RT-PCR to diagnose about COVID, right? So yeah, there goes. Right. So this is a question by Dr. Tridib Chatterjee, Mumbai. What are the corner signs for CT-ILD? What would be the corner signs for CT-ILD? Actually, that's
Decumbing for IPF and subpleural sparing for NSIP pattern.
mainly. Yes. Okay, here's a question by Dr. Gopi Krishna Vijayawada. Is there a specific sign in differentiating lymphangitis carcinomatosis and pulmonary edema?
Not really. No specific sign.
The nodules, other than the nodules, perhaps it would come
Maybe.
later on.
Yeah, maybe nodules.
Okay. Dr. Shweta from Hyderabad is asking which type of CT is preferred in case of pleural diseases?
Pleural diseases, we prefer CECT.
All right.
Yeah, over NCCT.
So next question. So here's a question, okay. Sir, which book do you recommend for MD pulmonary students for chest radiology?
First of all, Web. Most important book. Web 3rd edition or HRCT Web. And Indian authors Ames Mamsi PGI, wonderful book. Also, specific topics like chest tumor, chest infection, and ILD by Dr. Ashu Seth Bhalla, Clinical Radiological Series. These are 3 separate books. And
all right,
you should see some articles, especially Dr. Ashu Seth Bhalla and Dr. Mandeep Garg.
All right. I think I would also like to add in here, someone had asked about when to repeat CT thorax, right? So for COVID, yes, there would be specific indications, like, as we said, if the patient is deteriorating or we want to see maybe a pneumothorax. Lots of times patients with COVID are getting pneumomediastinum, they're getting pneumothorax. So that is one part to it. Other part is we need to know in specific diseases when we want to repeat CT thorax. For example, for solitary pulmonary nodule, we have the Fleshner guidelines, right? So yes, when you're reading all these books, Web, and also the Fleshner guidelines, they are the go-to guidelines. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Vijay Kumar Shanam Shetty, who is the web coordinator for CCI. And it is because of the continued efforts, because of Sir's continued efforts, that we are able to take this academic quest forward. Sir, we welcome you.
Thank you, Dr. Kirat and Dr. Nikhil. In fact, there is no hesitation for me to proudly announce that, you made CCI very proud today. You made really, us very proud by handling such a complex topic in a very simple manner. It's like, someone eating like a chocolate, right? Huh? So it was fantastic, Dr. Nikhil. And then,
Thank you.
yes, I must give, more scores to, Dr. Kirat for, handling the session, moderating session wonderfully, right?
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Nikhil, can
Yes.
I have, some questions for you, right? So what is this? We are really, being pulmonologists, this MIP, MAP, this is some concept which, most of us doesn't, we do hear, but we don't know, when to use it, when not to use it. Can you
Yes.
throw some light on it?
Minimum intensity projection is generally used for blood vessels uh, and maximum intensity projection is generally used for nodules.
Okay.
Right.
But what do you do when you are, when I want to do it a MIP mode or MAP mode kind of thing? Okay, do I need to adjust something in the settings of the software?
There is both of the modes are there, sir, in the software. We just have to select the mode and select the slice thickness. That's all.
Okay, right. Okay.
So when we increase the slice thickness, we can see the MIP image on.
That means you have not, revealed some secrets here in the talk. Okay, no problem. So
long talk.
another
It was a long
interesting.
topic.
Yeah. I totally understand. It's all your experience combined with, you have to deliver here in very short time. Okay, less than an hour. Probably you may need 4 hours, 5 hours time to cover almost everything, right?
Yes, sir. That too only introduction to CT.
I think we were only swimming on the top layer of the deep seas. We went from the shallow water to the deep seas, but we were still swimming on the top only.
So this makes me think of, yes, we have to do probably in 3 months' time one more session with both of you, or at least with Nikhil, regarding the depth of CT understanding. Okay, right. And is there any specific signs to identify these fungal infections on COVID? Because we, as by being a practitioner who have seen more than probably 5,000, around 5,000 cases in my practice of COVID, it is very important, I feel, to identify any infection, secondary infection, particularly mucormycosis or aspergillosis. Okay, what do you suggest the Chest Council of India pulmonologists? More than I got to know that almost 1,200 plus are watching us. What is your message? Because these fungal infections, when I diagnose early, then the outcomes are better. When I diagnose even 4 or 5 days later, the outcomes are very bad. So, what is your take on Dr. Nikhil and Dr. Kirat? Both, please answer.
Sir, in angio-invasive aspergillosis, I've already told 2 signs are very important: halo sign and air crescent sign. Those are very important to look for. So they are the indicators, first of all.
See, if you look at this what do you call atoll sign? Okay, these kind of things we do see in many COVID patients as well. It is very difficult for us to differentiate which is really a fungal infection or which is because of COVID. Very tough decision. Maybe clinical decision is very important. What do you say, Dr. Kirat?
I think, sir, early bronchoscopy, when you see that it could be a suspicion, we could have a suspicion for any fungal disease, because that's the only way to actually have a conclusive, to send out specimen. That's it. Although we are going to avoid bronchoscopy in COVID patients as much as possible, if we don't have a good enough specimen, we will have to go in for the, procedures.
Right. Any more questions to discuss here, or? Brilliant session. Okay, let me, thank you. First of all, most importantly, our chairman trustee, Dr. N.H. Krishna, who has identified the hidden excellent talent in both of you. Okay, let me, really congratulate Dr. N.H. Krishna and brilliant moderation, Kirat. Okay, really, I am looking forward, to do, many more sessions with both of you. And what's most important here is, okay, whether someone volunteering to deliver a class on such a critical topic and investing time. Yes, many can invest, but investing time for, CCA, I must appreciate Dr. Nikhil for his valuable contribution of his, knowledge and time, both here. Thank you, Dr. Nikhil, for a wonderful talk. And I have seen Dr. Bhavin Jankaria's and other Dr. Ashu's lectures so for the past maybe around, more than decade. I can see probably you in 2030 as a Bhavin Jankaria. Okay, my wishes for that. Okay, so please focus on, this further uh, dissemination of HRCT knowledge to the pulmonologists, and so that we all pulmonologists will treat you as a equivalent to Bhavin and Ashu both. And really, there is a what we have witnessed for the past close to 2 years was a fantastic webinar. Thank you, Cipla, for giving CCI a huge support for past 10 months. We're doing, back-to-back webinars. Thank you, Kirat. Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you all the CCI core committee members, Dr. Narendra Metaku, Dr. Ravi Doshi, Dr. Atri, the spokesman of CCI, Dr. Narayan Pradeepa. All are, relentlessly working towards the quality webinars. Yes. Anything you want to add, Dr. Kirat?
I want to thank you, sir. I think for Nikhil that that it's such a great, so huge that compliments. Seeing even just thinking about Dr. Jankaria. I had the honor of meeting him at Interventional Pulmonary League a few years back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Impressive, and such an honor that to just think that you are actually it's a big compliment, and thank you for that. And I want to thank Dr. Krishna for really motivating us to come forward. I want to thank you for giving us the time and for us to always have that kind of support, knowing. And I want to share this in particular. So all the delegates who are watching us right now, they should know that all the young pulmonologists, that CCI is really a platform which is a platform for the young pulmonologists. They are encouraged, they are taught, they are nurtured. And here is a place where you can grow along with the mentors who would otherwise be so far out of reach. But here they are just, a call away. And that is why CCI is really like a family, more than an organization.
The CCI, prime motto is, okay, live, let live. Grow, let us grow. Okay, our juniors. Okay, CCA is what is because in very short term, because of its principle. Okay, yes, you are senior. Yes, your junior must be in the limelight. You are playing I can say parent role or fatherly role. Okay, to nurture their talent. That's what. This is, brilliant thoughts from the Dr. N.H. Krishna and the core members.
Yes, sir.
And fantastic speaking to both of you, lovely couple. Okay. God bless you. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, sir.
Thank
Good
you very
evening.
much.
Bye,
Good
Nikhil.
night.
Good night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye. Bye.